Welcome to the Fatigue Files, a podcast that explores fatigue conditions from as many angles as possible while pushing the boundaries of thinking about fatigue as a signal to the 21st century and beyond. Cutting-edge thinking, practical strategies, thought-provoking explorations. They're going to all be here, and I'm your host, Anna Greer, welcoming you to this edition of the Fatigue Files. So everybody, I have with me on this edition of the podcast, the gorgeous Silvia Binder, who I will ask to introduce herself since she can do it so much better than I can.
Well, hello there, my dear Anna and wonderful listeners. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I am a naturopathic physician with an ND PhD degree. That was my second career path. I was born in Germany, grew up in Vienna, Austria. I studied business and then moved to New York when I was around 21 years old. As an entrepreneur at 23, I became the vice president of a semiconductor processing machinery company from Germany. Today, many years forward, and having lived in New York, I moved my family back to Germany, where also we founded the Binder Institute for Personalized Medicine. This is the institute where I would see patients virtually, in person, do healing retreats, lecture under the institute, write, publish, and say those things that as the CEO of the Ondamed companies, which is a medical device employing physics, pulse-electromagnetic fields as the mechanism of action, and saying that which I couldn't say as a CEO. I lecture worldwide. As I said, I publish papers. I wrote a book, which is on Amazon, which is called Ondamed, A Story of Love, Healing, and Medical Revolution. And then about 4.5 years ago, I moved to Nigeria. And so I ended up working with the Federal Ministry of Health. They built a wellbeing center for me based on my recommendations of, how to equip it and how to put it together. And then recently, they were talking to me about possibly building the first ever traditional complementary alternative medicine hospital.
The reason I wanted to talk to Silvia is because Silvia specializes in employing her intuition in her therapeutic medical work. Now, this is a subject that could be very, very powerful for people who want to learn how to follow their intuition towards their own healing. So this is the conversation I want to have with Silvia today. And Silvia, can I begin by asking you how it is that you go about tuning into your intuition when you have a patient in front of you? What's that like? What does it involve?
Yeah, that is a very good question, because that is really, it's a mystery. And I would love to help in demystifying that which is so difficult to express in words. But I'll try to use words that possibly create the picture in your heads so that you can connect to the message I'm trying to paint for you. I want to first preface in saying that on purpose, I did not prepare for this interview. I want to stay authentic, and I'm really serious about this because there's a lot of quacks out there that talk a lot and never follow what they recommend and advise, but I do live that which I teach and preach. And I didn't want to prepare, since intuition is based on trusting the moment, falling into the depth of time. Now listen to what I'm saying. Nobody talks about the depth of time. Time for us as humans, we visualize it as going forward, always on a straight line. That's very two-dimensional. Time can have a depth. And as the more we fall into the moment or connect to the knowing, as I call it, others call it, like Sam Harris, US neuroscientist, philosopher, very popular these days. He calls it the void. But from our understanding, what a void is, that's not the most positive connotation, because a void is empty. I do not think that the knowing is empty at all. There is a lot of positive, powerful, informative energy in that moment. And moment is not a place. Moment is not necessarily a time, as we, again, humans, as we have conditioned, as we experience it. So I wanted to fall into the moment with you, Anna, and let that which comes out of where we don't know it comes from, let that come through. And if nothing comes through, well, then so be it. Then it will be a very short podcast.
What I'm hearing you say, it reminds me of the whole art of just presencing, of simply being with what's there.
Yes.
And being open to who we truly are as consciousness itself. And that the consciousness that forms the field out of which everything emerges is the place of all information, which takes the form, as I'm hearing you say, of energy. And that the not knowingness from the cognitive mind, the being willing to fall into the knowing through our own not knowing, produces the kind of information that we can't cognitively access, but which emerges out of that beingness, out of that presence. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, well captured. And I want to say it in the way that they explain Sufi therapy. The Sufi therapist is from the place of where, let's say, what is that called in English now? The Upper Asian place, so the Arabic world, let's say. It is Sufi healing is to become one with God.
Right.
And so that is the most beautiful expression and explanation of what healing, and it's not the therapist that heals. And I'll make that very clear. And Jesus, apparently, as scriptures say, I don't know if it's true, Jesus also said, it is your belief in me that healed you. And there's a lot of arrogance in the field of medicine. And I do like to bring that up in my courses to remind people to stay humble, because without humility, you have a hard time in grounding, in being who you can be. And as we say today, a modern term is to be the best version of yourself. And so becoming one with God. I'm not religious, but I do believe in more than myself. Going beyond that which I am, and that, let's call it the creative source, or let's call it consciousness and subconsciousness. It's that I believe even the evolution theories and the Big Bang, if there even was a Big Bang, it's all based on consciousness. So tapping into that which has always been, it wasn't created. But for us humans, it's a much easier concept to get a hold of. So now I'm going to go back to the question, well, what do you do when you're with a patient? So the patient can be in my space, meaning either with me personally. You can do this, I do this all the time. Patients are in the US, they are in Asia, and I may be in Germany or in Africa. And I can do the very same because I allow myself to do one thing. It's just one thing. And that is, it will take practice, is to reduce fear. So fear that it may not work, that you cannot tap in, that there is no scientific evidence. But if you look at the term intuition, that is exactly what it says. So it is okay not to know where it comes from, because there's a lot of things in life that we don't know where they come from. So when we fall into the moment and connecting with the individual and tapping into the knowing, what is most important is to experience no fear, since you are in the moment with yourself, not feeling yourself, because the self is an illusion anyways, but you are hovering in this meditative moment. Maybe there's better words to describe it. You are hovering in the now without judgment and without expectation, and you just breathe and you are. So being with the other, or being with yourself, and we'll get to that, but being with the other in almost waiting for the music to start. And once the music starts, you start to move and to dance. The dance in this case is the treatment, the scanning, the tapping in, the asking questions. But and you don't hear, some people, they say a prayer, some people say some spiritual opening sentences. Well, whatever works for you. That's not really necessary for me. Just to breathe, empty your brain, let no shadow of thought come in, give it power, give it energy, let it just flow, let the clouds in your head flow, and just be in the moment. And then it's amazing what you can observe from the individual with you. And then also what comes in. So it's like a three-part. And interesting that religion also speaks about that. So it is the opening, and I'm making this gesture here coming from the top in, because this is again a conditioning. There is no place up on top or from the bottom. It's just coming in, but the space needs to be available, and you need to be ready to receive and not expecting a certain outcome. You're not attached to any outcome, and bringing that information to your patient, so that the patient, so let's say you hear something, how do I experience this? Well, I often see pictures. I see a picture of a little girl in front of me, might be a woman in her late 40s, but suddenly within milliseconds, I see a little girl with her rubber boots standing in the woods, and there's lots of trees around her. That is so quick. And I don't know if it's a real picture. I'm not doing any neuroscience imaging. And I can just tell you that whatever that picture, or it comes in as words, as sounds, I would then interpret and give that information onto my patient, but not in a way where I own it. Very important. I would present it in a very careful and loving way, that this is what I just received, if the person can do anything with that information. And then it will take some time for them to recollect, to tap into the memory. And it's quite amazing of what can come from that. I'm going to stop now. I have talked a long time.
So I heard there a very key thing about letting go of fear. So when you're, this is about working with intuition, right? So letting go of fear and just being open to what comes, and not giving into the anxiety about looking like an idiot if you get it wrong, etc. Right? Just But there's a deeper principle here as well, isn't there, for those of us walking the path of healing, which is that fear states in and of themselves lock us into very narrow realities, whereas opening to deeper levels, let's say, of trust in life, in our body, in ourselves, trusting that the symptoms we might be getting are forms of wisdom speaking to us from the depths of our body. There's a real pattern here that speaks to how to heal, isn't there? Isn't it really at a very deep level about allowing the body to relax, to self-love, to arrive, and ultimately to trust the flow of life, while performing skillful interventions that arise from a deeper wisdom?
Yes, well said. I want to say that, we say, okay, energy healing. Energy is tapping into the energy, and energy is, everywhere, and everything breaks down into energy, which is the truth. There also, I was thinking, because my son, Benjamin, he's a great challenger of mine, of what I do. And he has brought a lot of wonderful scientific information to me. He studies philosophy and science here close to me in Freiburg, Germany. And he said, what does that really mean, intuition? What do you see? What is that? Maybe it's just luck. Maybe it's just coincidence. I said, yeah, maybe. However, when that luck goes on for 30 years and more, would we still call it luck? Well, but I thought about it. And then I had, when you sit still, let's say you have a problem with your daughter and you don't know, the thoughts are just too much in your head. Try to sit still. Try to not fear other things than being. And you could do that for hours and for days, on and off. You'll be amazed at the information that can reach you. The information is always there, but are you able to receive it? Are you able to interpret it? Are you able to give it honor and respect? Or are you just saying, oh, that's a stupid thought in my head? So when I gave that space and time for myself, I realized that also when I look at people, there is a certain algorithm about disease. And disease is just, it's something that deviates from what we would assume is normal. That doesn't mean that it's sick. It doesn't mean that there is a disease necessarily physiologically or mentally, but it's something that is abnormal to the conditioning of our human life in the 21st century. And there is, it may have to do, algorithm, of course, the word algorithm for me, immediately I think of math, I think of numbers, but go beyond that. If you realize that you're just awakening continuously to the moment. You're constantly awakening to yet another moment. And as you awaken and you look out of your, I'm going to say out of your face, not that you look out of your face, but I want to give the input of it's not in the physical eyes. There are perception sensors all over our body in the energy field. The energy field is, Valerie Hahn said it goes up to, depending, the field can be very large. You can fill a whole room. And people, when you enter the room and they're on the other end of a large room, they will look up because they feel a presence without you touching them, obviously. So there is something to that. There's a condensed energy and there is a lighter energy, if you wish. It's just words. If I told a blind person about that, they wouldn't understand possibly what it is that I'm talking about. when I explain colorful things. So it's the same with us. We're blind to certain words and languages that go beyond that of which we have been conditioned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And actually what you're saying, I mean, there's quite a lot of interesting science around this now, around the human energy field. Instruments that can measure it, that can photograph it. And that's not just, I mean, yes, electromagnetic energy, but there are more subtle forms of energy that sensors can pick up on. And, you know, heart-brain coherence, for example, generates a particular field so that the most coherent person in any interaction will tend to draw the other person towards coherence. We have proprioception, so we have interoception, exteroception. You can even feel when somebody's looking at you, sometimes through a subtle pressure in the field. And, you know, animals have some of these capacities too.
Of course.
You know, these are deeply natural capacities that are extremely useful to develop, aren't they? And what I'm hearing in all of this really, and I reflect on this, I suppose, a lot as someone who meditates and also works quite a lot with hypnotic phenomena, is the limited nature of the cognitive brain, the limited nature of the processing of our rationality, which is not to knock it. It's very valuable. We use it very intelligently as humans. But there's a whole realm, an enormous realm of sensing, knowing, feeling, and being that far transcends that. And it sounds to me, Silvia, as if your work has a beautiful blend of these factors because you've got the training, you've done the studying, you know about different body systems, you're highly articulate and astute about the science. So you've got all that, but you drop it and you come into this sense of connection with the patient. You allow your non-cognitive facility to bring up information from their field that might emerge from their field or your sensing of their field. And that then plays through your knowledge, I assume, to bring skillful suggestions about symptomology and which direction they could move their health choices in and all that sort of stuff. Is that right?
Yes, because I'm in love with science, observation, when not done for capitalistic reasons, but for reasons of wishing to understand. So I love neuroscience and I listen a lot to neuroscientists because I want to know what it is that they're finding, and they'll find more and more about the weird things we talk about, which have been talked about for thousands of years, if you think about it. And here comes a Western medicine, allopathic medicine. And I love allopathic medicine. It has saved my life, the life of my son, Randy. So there is a brilliance in that. And then there is a weakness in it. And I wish to use all the brilliant systems available to me that I've been searching for myself in my own home studies. And anybody can do this. You don't need to have a degree in something. I'm just saying, you can do your own home studies now with the internet, right? With podcasts, you can learn so much. I don't know if you ever heard that, but when I moved to New York, they said, if you read the Wall Street Journal for 1 year, it's like going to university for 1 year.
I've never heard that.
Yeah. Probably only in New York to say that.
Quite possibly, yeah, absolutely.
So we can do a lot in enhancing our knowledge. Knowledge is fantastic to have. And that needs to be merged with wisdom. Wisdom is hard to get. Wisdom is not in books necessarily. Wisdom is that which you make of that which is in a book and put to practice, and go through the trial of error and success. It needs to be applied and then justified and defined. Not justified, defined, I wanted to say, and refined. So to bring it all together and understanding that we humans, we have such a huge potential that far exceeds that which I call the overrating of the brain.
Yes.
The brain is one thing, yes. Like when I talked to a neurosurgeon for some years ago, and he said the brain is the most important organ, of course. If you talk to the cardiologist, the heart is the most important organ. Of course, you invested into it. I get that. But, you couldn't live without a heart and you couldn't live without a brain. Hello. And you'll need a few more things than that. And so when we use the combination of all that we can be and all that we are, and then, of course, always strive to become more, well, then that is ideal. And whether we have a hunch about something, maybe in the animal, which we are also, humans are part of the animal kingdom, we may call the dog hunting and reacting as an instinct. Well, humans also have instinct. And then to make it finer, it's the intuition. And, I did look around, Anna, to see, but what's out there on intuition? And do you know, I could barely find anything. No one, or that's an exaggeration maybe, but I cannot find physicians or besides maybe Ayurvedic practitioners that speak about, or not even them, they don't speak about intuition per se. They speak about other things, the Kundalini and the chakras and the energy fields. But I hardly find anything on the internet relating to intuition. I find it very interesting that most people don't dare to go there. Maybe it's because it's not just a daring, it's a fear factor again. And also it's a not understanding factor. And maybe they will put it down because it's not scientifically made into evidence. And there's a lot of nonsense out there. I agree. It's hard to find someone that you can really trust. But I'm not talking about trusting anybody. We are here to talk about to develop your own intuition and to use that as a healing method to help connect yourself more from a more holistic and deeper level than what people talk about.
Okay, so there's two strands in what you were just saying that I really want to respond to. And the first one is this thing about intuition not being acknowledged by mainstream medicine and science. I find this fascinating because as the years have gone on, I've, obviously, and I think this is in the public awareness, we're becoming more aware of the role of intuition in some of the world's greatest thinkers. So Einstein immediately comes to mind. Einstein was very into intuition and understood how to respond to intuitive signs. So the story goes, and I don't know if it's purely apocryphal, but the story goes that Einstein had a dream about bananas, and that when he woke in the morning, he thought bananas, curves, curvature of space-time, and got to his theory of relativity. That's how the story goes. But what's interesting about when people discuss Einstein, they talk about the genius of his theories, and it's not associated publicly in quite the same way with his use of intuition, of how he got to where he got to was a mixture, obviously, of his skill with physics, but also his intuitions. That's one thing. And I think one reason for that is because the public view of reason is very narrow and has historically been very masculinist. And intuition has always been associated with the female, the feminine. And so for as long as Western society has this male-female split in the architecture of how it looks at rationality in public life, I think that's part of what's going on there. But the other thing that struck me when you were speaking was a question. So you're very warmly encouraging people, rightly, to get in touch with their own intuition, to trust their intuition, perhaps especially in their healing process. So it's a very practical question. How do they do it, apart from, you've said, breathing, showing up in the present moment, breathing, and detaching from any fear in the system, which we can do through a whole series of methods, including somatic sensing and all sorts of stuff. But if I was your patient and I was coming to you and I didn't know anything about intuition and I wanted to heal from chronic fatigue, what would you say to me, Silvia, about how I can step into that space for myself?
It is most important that you come to peace with yourself. You need to work on yourself, investigate. Why does it make me feel this way? Why? There's not just the way why you react to it. There's a scenario. But why are you feeling the way you're feeling? Where's that coming from? You want to apply a scientific method and not emotional. It should not be ridden by emotions, but by achieving an understanding of the reasons of reactions. You need to stop yourself, halt. You may want to react to something in your head. Let's say a thought comes in and you're getting tense and you have this certain reaction. Stop yourself. And this is where mindfulness comes in. What is mindfulness? Well, you are observing not only that which is around you, and all of that becomes second nature. It's training. You have to train those abilities, just like when you drive your car. Everything is separate in the beginning until you don't even think about it anymore. And everything is just flowing. What's the same here? So you stop yourself and you say, why does it make me tense? What is it? And then you'll notice that situation is just prompting something that has been in you for a long time. And then to come to a sort of an understanding, a closure, a forgiveness, a holding on, but now at least you know what? I know why I feel this way, because back then when I was 2 years old, whatever. And yes, you can forgive or you don't forgive, but at least you know you've connected with it.
If I was your patient, what I'm hearing you're saying is one thing to do is to develop a mindfulness practice, because that practice exercises a muscle of objective self-observation that opens up a space in which when a response comes from the body, you're not just pulled into it, you notice it. And in noticing it, you stop and there's a moment of curiosity. And then more skillful maybe exploration, where you might be open to images, feelings, things that come up to give you clues about where that pattern of reaction or whatever it is originates or comes from, or at least what the mechanics are of it in the present. So if there's a particular dynamic in a relationship where perhaps you always feel your symptoms around a particular person, or your symptoms feel worse around a particular person, that mindfulness would enable you to go introspectively, notice that, perhaps reflect on the dynamic, and then get a more skillful awareness of, that's because the way they're using their tone of voice reminds me of that teacher I had when I was 5 who isolated me from the class, and it was extremely traumatic and I've never dealt with it. And so then the invitation is there, from what I'm understanding you saying, to work with that skillfully, to actually reconcile with that, process that memory, allow the charge that's been locked up in the unconscious to be released, however you do it. And obviously, sometimes people will use psychotherapy, which is a long, thoughtful way of doing it. Sometimes they'll use hypnosis. Sometimes they'll just use somatic sensing. Experienced meditators might just experience the energy and release it through their system as energy and, not need to even go and look at it. They connect to it non-cognitively. So that's what I got from what you're saying. So the skill set you're inviting patients to have is develop this ability to sense, to have a space in which you're aware of what's happening and you can attune to what's happening with a degree of sensitivity that allows the energy locked up in whatever that is to experience that attunement and to loosen its grip in the body, the unconscious, wherever it's being stored and held. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, to let go of the patterns which have been sclerosed,
yes.
hardening in yourselves for all these years. It is also important that you don't take it too seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. Don't take the memories too seriously, because you need to remember a memory is just that, a memory. It doesn't mean it reflects
That's
truth.
Right. Yeah.
So that is an important one. But it is not about judgment when you have a memory. It is about understanding more about yourself. And so while that is an important practice, you need more than that. You need the treatments, as you said. It could be, I have many forms of bringing in different therapies, and a combination of many is ideal. People usually go from one, that it works a little, then to another, that works a little again, and there's nothing wrong with that, because it is an evolutionary process, getting to know yourself, right? So that can hopefully take all your life. And so it is important that you surround yourself with energies that make you feel whole. If there is energies that don't make you feel whole, you need to stay away from that, because that will enhance your fear and related negative emotions. So even if it is a relative or family or work environment, that is very important to see clearly. What is good for me? And even more important, because that's a hard one, I found that at some point, knowing what is not good for you is shorter. The list is shorter in most cases. And so you have to distance yourself and self-protect. And you'll be amazed of how better you will feel and how much more potential you will release of your healing abilities. So that's important. That includes, I'm not only talking about humans, but also, if there is animals around you, city or country life, or if it's cars, or, food, etc., etc. If something doesn't do you as good as it should, then find something new. That's simple.
What you're saying there, I guess, is anything that the system interprets as a stressor or a toxin is going to be unhelpful.
Yes, correct.
And I guess there are two ways of dealing with it. One is, as you say, to detach and put a boundary down. And the other would be to reframe, because some things we can actually render less powerful through a reframe, like you just did with memories. Memories are not necessarily true events. They're just the way the brain laid down information for a whole load of complex reasons. And every time we revisit a memory, we change it anyway. So it's not an actual source of information, but there's something contained in that we nonetheless need to attend to. But we can also reframe and change our perspective and our understanding, which liberates us from perceiving or receiving something as a toxin. But sometimes that's not going to be enough. Sometimes we really do need to go, you know what? I just need to detach, forgive, bless, and move on.
Yeah, we need to understand that human history is based on stories, and meaning that every one of us is creating their own many, many stories. It doesn't mean it is the truth or the reality. So if you have created a story that is a no-win because it's a story that is reflecting less truth than it should, then it is important that you reflect again. It is so important to keep on reflecting on relationships, on everything, basically, that you think and do and feel. So reflection is important. And it is important to have help. So yes, listening to this podcast or listening, I made a list, and there's only a few items on there, of authors or people that have put a contribution that made a difference in my life, in my self-discovery.
Great. And we'll put those sources in the show notes. Some practical stuff in there, that mindfulness, reading these sources and practicing this not knowingness that leads to tuning into the present moment in the knowing. Silvia, it's been absolutely lovely to see you again. Thank you very much for giving up your time for the podcast audience. I think they'll really appreciate that.